Good day, ladies and gentlemen. It's Eric Coffin. I'm here at my Metals Investor Forum in Vancouver, Sunday, January 28th, 2023. I'm here with John Black. He's the CEO of Regulus Resources. It's one of the companies that I invited to present. And the reason why I invited them is because Regulus has a very large copper gold resource in Peru. It's one that's still growing, but in addition to sort of the ongoing drilling and resource work, you had something pretty interesting come up. I mean, I've said to readers in the past that John and Kevin always seem to find a way to pull a rabbit out of the hat. And you pulled another rabbit out of the hat 2 or 3 weeks ago with Rio Tinto subsidiary Newton writing a check for $20 million. I'm assuming they're not the world's most altruistic people. Maybe they are, but I'm assuming there's a reason why they wrote a check for $20 million. Can you walk us through what their decision was and what does this mean going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. And as you're well aware, it's, despite an overall optimistic environment for the future of copper prices, the markets haven't been that cooperative, and many of us have been concerned about dilution if you have to do an under market financing. So largely due to Adam Greening, our VP for corporate development, we've come up with a couple of important ways to obtain access to funds to move forward to minimize dilution. So it started with a couple investments we had with the Cisco Gold royalties, where we sold minor royalties to them to get non-dilutive, non-equity cash in to go forward, avoided a financing that way. And then we've been working with Rio Tinto for quite some time, starting with their exploration division, and that evolved into a new division of Rio Tinto called Newton that specializes in leach technology for primary sulfides. And that resulted in them making the decision to take an equity placement with us at a substantial valuation above market for us. So it was a nice endorsement of the project. And it's not just because they want to invest in us as good explorers. They believe that this new Newton technology they have will be very applicable at our project. And they'd like to do some additional test work and demonstrate to us that this might be the best pathway forward. It's important to note it's not the only way forward. We can go through conventional concentrate production or pressure oxidation processing of a concentrate. But this potentially offers a very good alternative to those that could be more profitable. So we're pretty excited to engage with them. Another important thing to note is they have their large La Granja deposit about 40 kilometers to the north of us. And they believe that this technology might be very appropriate for that, but it'll be a little easier for them to commence on our project, which is effectively a brownfields project to start with. So I think they have bigger ideas in mind than simply perhaps rolling up our district.
Okay, but not to belabor the obvious to to viewers, part of what Rio Tinto is probably potentially thinking is rolling up the district, and I think it's worth pointing out at this juncture. I mean, it's part of the reason why I own Regulus is obviously John and Kevin, but it's also because John and Kevin have done this before. Regulus is in fact a spin out of another company where you guys successfully built a large resource and a major came along and paid you a lot of money for it. And this, you're basically just trying to do it again here, essentially.
That's our strategy, really, is we've got a lot of decades of experience in the South American Cordillera, and because of that, we know of projects that are out there that people might not fully realize the full potential. So we try to put our hands on those, but we're pretty careful to pick projects that have potential to be a very large copper or copper gold deposit, the type of project a major wants. And you capture those when you can, when prices are low or somebody needs to sell them or whatever it is. But it's important to note, one, we're not the only group that's done that. We're effectively copying what Ross Beatty's Alumina Copper Group did for many times. The Lundin family has done this successfully, Richard Warwick, a number of others. The common denominator in all of these groups is experienced people that know the countryside well, that have a strategy to put hands on projects, add that value, but monetize it by passing it off to the miners. So the shareholders get their return more quickly, and we avoid that valley of death that you go through before you put it in production. So that's important to us. We learned a lot the first time around. I think we came in as exploration geologists thinking you just found lot of material with good grade and somebody would buy it. Now we understand there's a lot more to that. There's a lot of de-risking. There's a lot of making sure it's an attractive opportunity for the major miners. So,
well, and just for people that perhaps aren't familiar with Regulus, which trades REG, by the way, on the venture, maybe just give people an idea of what you already have at Anta, because you already got a really big resource. It's not like you're starting from a standing start here. It's already pretty bloody big.
Yeah, so the resource we have right now is about 50% indicated, 50% inferred. So the indicated resource is 250 million tons at about 0.48% copper, sort of average copper grade for big copper systems.
Right.
But it also has about 0.3 gold associated with that and about 7 grams of silver.
Okay.
So if you looked at a combined copper or copper equivalent grade, it's quite above average on a project like this. And we have an additional 267 million tons of similar grade as inferred. So over 500 million tons of total mineralization defined to date. That's very much open for expansion. We'll do a resource estimate later this year that should show a nice bump to the size of it. And that by itself is not terribly different than the project that we sold in our predecessor company to First Quantum.
Right.
But it's only a portion of the overall deposit. There's that much or more mineralization on the neighbor's ground. And the neighbors are a company called Minera Coimolache. It's a joint venture that's operated by Buenaventura, and their partners are Southern Copper and a local company called Espro. So those three companies together operate the Tantahuatay mine.
Right.
And at Tantahuatay, what they're doing is they're mining the oxide cap over this large copper gold sulfide that's partly on their ground, partly on our ground.
Right.
They run out of ore in 4 or 5 years, but they're effectively pre-stripping and preparing an opportunity to make an expansion into a much larger copper gold sulfide deposit. But to do that optimally, they need to combine our ground with theirs, or someone needs to come in and wrap the whole thing up.
Right, and this is a contiguous body of mineralization.
Yes.
If you look at some of their sections, it's just like this boundary line, and it's here and it's over there. It's not two separate things. It's one big thing. And have they? I think they're really outdated, but I mean, they've got a resource that's up in that same kind of hundreds of millions of ton range.
Yeah, we show approximately 500 million. They show about 900 million tons of inferred mineralization. It's slightly lower grade. They use a lower cutoff for it,
right,
as we understand it. But important to note that both of us have done extensive drilling since we've last reported,
right,
and it's hard for either of us to really show our resource when we're constrained to just our side. If you
right,
consolidated this district and showed the resource, the potential is notable. But what's officially reported right now is already enough to be a very large copper deposit,
right,
and a very large gold deposit together on this.
Right.
So this project draws interest from the major copper miners, but also the major gold miners.
right.
And keep in mind, most of the major gold miners now are interested in getting exposure to copper as well,
Right.
particularly if it comes with a lot of precious metals.
Yeah, they're buying.
So-
Yeah, a lot of them are buying porphyries. Yeah, so I mean, collectively, it's like 1.5 billion tons. Their size is going to get bigger. Your size is going to get bigger. In terms of 2023, I mean, what can shareholders kind of look forward to? Is there anything notable going forward that?
Well, we've just announced the new association with Rio Tinto, so we're just in the process of vetting that, of putting that into a strategy to go forward. One of the things that we've agreed to do as part of this is to collect materials for additional metallurgical testing. So this will involve drilling of large diameter holes to do column tests and advance our studies on that. We're responsible for acquiring the drill material and
Right.
transporting it to where they'll do the test work. They pay for and conduct all of the test work, and we receive the results and we're allowed to publish those. They're interested in showing the world that their technology works well too.
Right.
So it's good. Sometimes you do this work without being able to reveal it. So we need to design that program and determine how much drilling is required and where it is.
Right.
We'll probably have to work with our neighbors to get access to certain areas to get the optimal samples for that. And I think you'll see us make a transition. We've been focusing on growing the deposit. We have some additional drill results to come out next week that'll wrap up our phase 2 program, which concluded just before Christmas. The mineralization will still be open,
Right.
but we may be making a bit of a pivot from continuing to grow the deposit to focus more on de-risking the project, determine what the best metallurgical pathway is, perhaps even acquiring ground for infrastructure for leach pads or other areas. Certainly increasing our work with the communities to make sure they understand the opportunity and are comfortable with what we're doing. So I think you'll see us move more towards feasibility type level activities and the work that's necessary to make the setting that you're confident you can build a mine. And that may add just as much value as showing there's more mineralization.
Okay, and the 20 million too, the 20 million you got from Newton, I mean, like you said, you've got to collect samples from and stuff like that, but that's a big enough check that it's not like all of that has to be spent on their stuff. That's just
a very small portion goes to that, and we're at liberty to use the rest of it on activity. We can't pay bonuses or anything with that, but focus on activities that will advance the project. And we get to understand a little bit that we have a pretty good idea from our previous experience in the first company, but we get to hear more directly what Rio Tinto or other companies want to see. Oftentimes, when we're at this stage, we start to get coaching. The groups that are under confidentiality agreement looking at us, they express what they're concerned about. And it's no longer grades and tons and size. We've cleared that threshold. Now they want to know about how much water you're going to use, where is it coming from, are the communities on board? And so you'll see us begin to focus more on those activities.
Okay. Great story. Like I said, they already have a very large resource. Understand that this is a team that has done this before. The Antares was sold for about $650 million, if I recall. Right now, Regulus, I think, has got about 100 million market cap. That's not expensive at all for a company that's got 500 million tons with these kind of grades. Because this, as John said, this is specifically exactly the kind of thing the big miners, both copper and gold, this is what they're looking for. So, I own it because I expect some kind of a transaction on AntaKori, and I'm sure we'll get there. It's just a matter of being a little bit more patient, and hopefully copper prices through the next year do some heavy lifting for us on the valuation side.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. The copper price certainly helps. It's not necessary. We would look for projects that are valuable at lower copper prices.
Yeah.
But a higher copper price, what it does is it really cashes up the majors, and it pushes them to want to grow. They move from being conservative to being growth oriented, and that's the trigger. We saw it happen in previous booms on copper prices. It really triggers.
Yeah,
the
you
M&A
tend to get
activity.
bunches of these transactions because they're all looking over their shoulder, and Joe Schmo over there takes over something. They're looking, and they're like, "Oh shit!"
That was my number one. I better get number two.
Yeah, exactly. That's how it works, folks.
Yep.
So welcome to John. John is our contestant in that beauty contest. So thanks for coming by, John. Great story. Looking forward to more news from Regulus and higher copper prices lifting all of our boats.
Great. Thanks, Eric.
Okay. Thanks, John.